His wife said, "His days are numbered and all his assets will be mine." What he did next makes her scream. "His days are numbered. Soon everything he owns will be mine. I can finally be with you, baby." Those were the chilling words Monica Miller whispered to her lover on the phone, unaware that her cancer-stricken husband had just returned from chemotherapy and was standing in the hallway, hearing every betrayal. She had no idea that the dying man listening to her confession had already begun orchestrating the most devastating posthumous revenge in history. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, greed, and justice. Viewers, what would you do if you discovered your spouse was literally waiting for you to die? How would you handle that kind of betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Jadine dragged himself through the front door of his Buckhead mansion, every muscle in his 45-year-old body screaming from the latest round of chemo. The cancer was winning, stage 3 pancreatic, the kind that makes oncologists speak in hushed tones about comfort care and making peace with family. His construction empire, built from 20 years of backbreaking work and shrewd business deals, felt meaningless now. What good were $12 million when your own body was betraying you? The house smelled like Monica's expensive perfume and fresh lilies. Always fresh lilies, replaced twice weekly by their housekeeper. Everything perfect, everything pristine, everything cold as ice beneath the surface. Monica had insisted on the remodel last year, turning their warm family home into something that belonged in Architectural Digest, rather than real life. His hands shook as he set down his keys, not from the medication this time, but from exhaustion that went bone deep. The doctors had given him 3 months. That's when he heard her voice floating from the kitchen. "His days are numbered. Soon, everything he owns will be mine. I can finally be with you, baby." Low and intimate in a way that made his stomach turn. She was laughing, actually laughing, while he'd spent the afternoon having poison pumped into his veins. "Baby, you don't understand how exhausting this charade has become," Monica continued, her voice carrying that slight accent that had charmed him at their first meeting. Playing the grieving wife, pretending to care about his treatment, sitting in those horrible hospital waiting rooms. But it's almost over now. His days are numbered. Jadine pressed himself against the hallway wall, his heart hammering so hard he was sure it would give him away. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of what he'd thought was love, devotion, partnership. She'd cried with him when they received the diagnosis. She'd held him when the fear kept him awake at night. She'd promised they'd fight this together. "Marcus, I know this has been hard on you too," she purred into the phone. "Waiting, being patient while I play house with a dying man. But think about it. $12 million, baby. We'll never have to worry about money again. We can travel, buy that place in Tuscany you showed me, live the life we've dreamed about." The life they'd dreamed about. While he was dreaming of remission, of more time, of beating the odds, his wife was dreaming of his funeral. Jadine's legs gave out. He slumped against the wall, his designer polo shirt damp with cold sweat. The same woman who'd fed him soup when he was too weak to hold a spoon was calculating his net worth with her lover. The same woman who'd researched experimental treatments online until 3 in the morning was counting down the days until she'd inherit everything he'd worked for. "I've already spoken to that estate lawyer, discreetly, of course," Monica's voice continued, each word a dagger to his already broken heart. "Jadine never updated his will after we married. Everything comes to me automatically. The construction company, the investment portfolio, the real estate holdings, it's all mine the moment he takes his last breath." Marcus must have said something because Monica laughed again, that tinkling sound that once made him cancel important meetings just to hear it over dinner. "Oh, darling, you should see how the cancer support group ladies look at me," she said with mock sympathy. "Poor Monica," they whisper. "Such a devoted wife, staying strong for her dying husband. If only they knew I'm counting down the days like a kid waiting for Christmas morning." This wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with at the Peachtree Plaza charity gala. That Monica had seemed genuinely interested in his stories about growing up poor in East Atlanta, about building his first house with his bare hands at 19. about losing his father to a construction accident and swearing he'd make job sites safer for other families. That Monica had cried when he told her about working 3 jobs to put himself through business school at night. Or maybe that Monica had never existed at all. Maybe she'd been playing a role from day one, sizing up his bank account while he'd been falling for her smile. 3 months, baby, she whispered into the phone. Maybe less if the chemo stops working. The doctors say his body is already shutting down. Soon we'll be together, properly together, without having to sneak around like teenagers. The irony hit him like a sledgehammer. He'd spent 20 years building something meaningful, not just wealth, but a legacy. Miller Construction had built half the affordable housing in South Atlanta. He'd created jobs, changed neighborhoods, lifted families out of poverty just like his own had been lifted, and his wife saw all of that as nothing more than the inheritance waiting to happen. J. Dean pushed himself off the wall and stumbled toward the stairs, his mind racing despite his body's weakness. Monica thought his days were numbered. She had no idea that her days of deception were about to end in the most spectacular way possible. The morning after that shattering discovery, Monica moved through the mansion with the elegance of an actress who had rehearsed her part for years. She carried a tray to his bedside, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Try to rest, darling. I'll be gone most of the day." Spa appointment. Her smile was perfect, her touch gentle. But J. Dean now knew the truth. Every gesture was performance. He watched her diamond bracelet sparkle as she brushed his shoulder, remembering the night she laughed about his numbered days. The moment her Mercedes glided out of the driveway, J. Dean sat upright. His heart pounded from more than illness. He picked up his phone and dialed a number that had guided him through every battle in business. "Hayes Milton, attorneys at law," the receptionist answered. "This is J. Dean Miller. I need to see Richard Hayes. It's urgent." By noon, he was seated across from Richard Hayes in an office paneled in dark wood and quiet confidence. The shelves behind the desk held casebooks and framed photos, contract signings, scholarship banquets, hard hats, and ribbon cuttings. Richard had helped incorporate Miller Construction back when all J. Dean owned was an old pickup, a sketchbook of floor plans, and an iron belief that safety and profit didn't have to fight. Richard took one long look. "How bad?" 3 months, J. Dean said. He let the number sit in the room. "But that's not why I'm here." He told him, plainly, the thing any man hopes never to say aloud, what he had heard from the hallway, the laughter, the whispered timeline to a new life funded by his death. The way grief had been rehearsed like a speech. Richard listened without interruption, hands folded, gaze steady. When J. Dean finished, the lawyer inhaled, then exhaled through his nose. "All right," Richard said. "If your goal is noise, you could make noise tomorrow. If your goal is certainty, we'll do this the quiet way." "Quiet," J. Dean answered. "Precise. She should discover the truth at the exact minute she believes she's won." They closed the door. Hours slid by in a disciplined sequence. Drafts prepared, memos cross-checked, signatures witnessed, a slim stack of documents sealed and labeled. There was no gloating in it, no heat. Just the sober geometry of a plan designed to hold even when grief and outrage pressed against it. Halfway through, Richard paused. "This will cost energy you don't have." J. Dean nodded once. "Then let's spend it where it matters." They reviewed a final page. Richard slid a folder into the safe, spun the dial, and rested his palm on the steel. "When the time comes," he said, "it will be clear." Dusk stained the Atlanta skyline when J. Dean stepped back into the elevator. He watched his reflection in the mirrored panel, thinner, grayer, but alive with a purpose that felt like oxygen. The chemo gnawed at him. The fatigue had teeth. Still, clarity carried its own strength. Monica believed time was whittling him down to nothing. She didn't know time could also carve. Back at the mansion, the lilies in the foyer had been refreshed. Always lilies, always perfect. The housekeeper moved quietly, glancing up with eyes that had learned not to ask questions. J. Dean thanked her, climbed slowly to his study, and sat with the city's glow pooling beyond the glass. He didn't think of money. He thought of first paychecks and muddy boots. He thought of the first duplex he framed himself, and the first crew who trusted him enough to follow his safety rules even when other sites cut corners. He thought of children who had slept in cars 2 blocks away from projects his company had built. When Monica's car pulled in hours later, he had already closed his eyes. She glided in with a smile, the scent of expensive lotion trailing behind her. "Sleep well?" she asked, voice syrup smooth. "Better than I expected," he said. September cooled the edges of the city. Inside the mansion, the air felt thinner, as if the house itself had learned to whisper. Machines hummed in the background. The housekeeper moved like a ghost with fresh linens. The lilies, changed again, leaned in their vase like perfect actors on their mark. Jadine's world narrowed to measured steps, careful sips, and the discipline of breath. He learned to count the minutes not by pain, but by purpose. He wrote notes to his crew leaders, quiet thank you disguised as instructions. He asked Richard to stop by once, briefly, to confirm what needed confirming, and to schedule what needed scheduling. Nothing in their conversation suggested spectacle. The plan depended on silence. Monica, meanwhile, delivered a masterclass. She pressed cool cloths to his forehead, spooned broth with a patience that looked like love, and gave updates to friends in a voice fine-tuned to humility and courage. They called her a saint. She lowered her gaze as if the compliment embarrassed her. The second phone stayed tucked in the kitchen drawer beneath a cookbook. It buzzed lightly against the wood. Monica ignored it when eyes were on her. She didn't when they weren't. Jadine used his strength exactly once more for the camera. On a bright Friday, while Monica took a spa day, Richard Hayes came with a discreet 2-person crew. No lights, no makeup. A microphone clipped under the collar of a shirt that had grown too large. "If you're watching this, I'm not there to say it," Jadine began, voice thinner than he remembered it ever being, yet steady. He spoke for nearly 30 minutes. No raised tone, no theatrics. Truth laid brick by brick like a wall designed to last. When the red light blinked off, Richard squeezed his shoulder. "You said exactly what you needed to say." A week later, on a Tuesday morning, Jadine's breathing softened, shallowed, and slipped away. Margaret Collins, his aged mother's hands, held his left hand. Monica held his right, tears tracking a perfect path through flawless makeup. For Margaret, the room shook with holy weight. For Monica, a door seemed to open. She planned a funeral with precision. Black dress, a single strand of pearls, a eulogy polished to gleam. She spoke of devotion and faith and the kind of love that turns two into one. People wept. Old friends pressed tissues into their faces. The housekeeper cried softly in the back pew. A man in the third row watched like a statue, polite, quiet, forgettable. He didn't sign the guest book. He didn't approach the family. He left before the last hymn ended. Monica's eyes tracked him once and slid away, landing on the faces that mattered more, those who would repeat her grace to others. The will reading was set for Thursday at Hayes Milton. In the 2 days between, Monica stood in front of her mirror and practiced a smile that said she felt blessed but undeserving. Online, she scrolled Miami listings and bookmarked a penthouse with ocean glass and white stone floors. She took calls and spoke of carrying his legacy, a phrase that sat sweetly on the tongue. Thursday arrived dressed like any other day. Monica entered the law office in a tailored suit, her mess tucked beneath her arm. Margaret waited at the end of the table with a folded handkerchief. 2 longtime employees, Ben Carter and Alicia Reed, sat with straight backs and careful hands. Richard entered with a slim folder and a laptop, face unreadable. "Before we begin the formal reading," he said, "Mr. Miller left a personal message to be viewed first." Monica's chin lifted, the practiced smile settling in. She imagined gratitude. She imagined praise. The screen brightened. Everything stilled. The image filling the laptop screen was not the man who had once strode fresh concrete in steel-toe boots. It was the man those years had made, a builder who knew the weight of every beam required truth beneath it. Jadine looked thin. He did not look small. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I'm not there to say these words." "Monica," he said, "this part is for you." Across the table, Margaret's hand found the edge of her chair. Monica's fingers whitened where they gripped the seat. "I heard you," Jadine continued, "from the hallway in our home, while I tried to remember what strength felt like. I heard you laugh at a calendar that measured my life in weeks. I heard you promise a future built out of what I would not live to see." He let the sentence stand alone. The room did not move. "In public," he said, "you were exactly who people needed you to be. Private is where truth lives. While I prayed for time, you counted it. While I looked at the house we built and saw promises kept, you studied its value." Monica stood halfway, then sat again, as if the floor had tilted. "I have spent my life believing foundations matter," Jadine said. "I cannot leave this one cracked. I cannot pretend not to know what I know. I don't say this to punish you. I say it because I have to build with the truth. I have acted to protect what matters," he said finally, voice thinning but firm. "What happens next won't feel like comfort. It will feel like consequence. That's not the same thing as revenge." He paused, not to gather breath, but to make space for the words to settle. "I loved the man I was when I tried to love you," he said quietly. "I'm leaving him what he needs to keep loving. This city, these people, the work we started." His gaze softened for the first time, the way a builder's eyes soften when a beam finally seats true. Then he nodded once toward the side of the camera, as if reminding someone to take it from here. The screen went black. The room's silence felt like fresh concrete, smooth, heavy, waiting to cure. Ben's jaw worked. Alicia's eyes shone. Margaret pressed the handkerchief to her lips. Monica stared at the screen as if it had reached out and taken something that belonged to her. She surged forward, catching herself on the table, then straightened, smoothing her jacket as if smoothing the moment. "Character assassination," she said, voice brittle. "He was not in a state to—" Richard's voice did not rise. "We will proceed to the reading as scheduled." He closed the laptop gently, like a lid on a box that contained more than paper. In the hallway, the muffled sound of reporters' voices rose and fell. On the table, a glass beaded with water. In the chair across from it, a woman recalculated her future in real time. "Let's resume," Richard said, opening the folder. Monica's practiced smile did not return. "Last will and testament of Jadine Miller," Richard read, "executed and witnessed according to Georgia law." Monica's posture became a sculpture, chin lifted, shoulders square, hands folded in a prayer that didn't ask for anything. She could feel the moment rushing toward her. Headlines, sympathy, control. Richard began with small bequests, specific gifts to longtime partners and causes. A safety research grant named for a foreman lost years ago. A scholarship for apprentices who'd reached journeyman. A donation of equipment to a trade school in South Atlanta. Ben's eyes flicked to Alicia. Both looked down, moved by the details only a builder would prioritize on his way out. Richard turned a page. "Residual estate provisions," he said, voice steady. "To be implemented through the accompanying trust instruments." Monica's breath loosened. Trusts, structures, sensible. She pictured a signature page with her name angled just so. 70% of Mr. Miller's estate, Richard continued, is directed to the Atlanta Children's Home to expand housing, education, counseling, and transition support for youth aging out of care. The room felt like it had shifted on its axis. Monica didn't move. 30%, Richard said, is directed to Margaret Collins, his mother, for her support and for charitable work in Jadine's name. He looked up. Nothing in his expression invited debate. "And to Monica Miller," he finished, "no distribution is granted." Sound returned to the room all at once, The soft intake of Alicia's breath, a chair creaking under Ben's weight, a faint hum from the vents. Margaret's hand flew to her chest, then dropped to the folded handkerchief in her lap. She did not speak. Tears welled and held. Monica's lips parted. For a heartbeat, no words came. Then they did, scrambled and sharp. "No distribution?" she echoed, as if repetition could change it. "I'm his wife." "The instruments are valid and witnessed," Richard said. He didn't lean forward. He didn't lean back. He simply existed in the exact place truth stands. "He wasn't capable." Monica's voice climbed, then cracked. "You're railroading me. This is a performance. That video—" Richard turned another page. "There is a recorded statement of knowledge and intent, as well as accompanying documentation regarding financial irregularities. Those materials are lodged with counsel." He did not raise his eyes to meet hers on that last line. He didn't need to. Monica's control dissolved. She stood so quickly her chair skidded and toppled backward with a wooden smack against the floor. She pointed at the folder, at the laptop, at Margaret, anywhere the fury could land. "You can't take my life and give it to strangers," she shouted, voice raw now. "I held his hand. I cared for him. She grabbed the back of the fallen chair, tried to set it upright, failed, let it clatter. Tears tracked through makeup that had never been designed for gravity. A lock of hair fell from its pin. She pushed it back with shaking fingers and laughed once, a sound with no humor in it at all. Through the glass wall, a few reporters on the far side of the lobby looked up, alerted by something in the air they couldn't hear. A camera shifted toward the conference room door. The door did not open. Monica collapsed back into the seat, breathing hard. "He can't be gone," she said to no one in particular. "He can't take it all away." But he had taken something, and given it elsewhere. To children who hadn't known their next bed. To a mother who had folded overtime pay into college textbooks. To a city that had watched buildings rise safely because he believed profit should never outpace protection. Richard closed the folder. "This concludes the reading." The room did not applaud or gasp. It absorbed. Margaret rose carefully, thanked Richard with a touch to the arm, and slipped the handkerchief into her purse. Monica stared at the table as if it owed her an apology. No one offered one. 2 summers later, sunlight flooded the courtyard of the Atlanta Children's Home as a crowd gathered beneath a new sign, the J. Dean Miller Memorial Wing. A ribbon ran taut between 2 brass posts. Children pressed close with paper flags in their fists. Staffers wiped their eyes and laughed at themselves for it. Margaret Collins stood in front with scissors that felt heavier than they looked. She wore a simple dress the color of sky after rain. When the director nodded, Margaret cut the ribbon in one crisp motion and the courtyard erupted. Cheers, claps, a trumpet squeak from a kid who'd brought his instrument just in case there was music. Inside, the new wing smelled of fresh paint and promise. Dorm rooms held sturdy beds with soft quilts folded just so. Study lounges glowed with rows of laptops and corkboards pinned with college brochures. A counseling suite welcomed kids whose stories didn't easily fit in sentences. In the library, brand new hardcovers waited with spines uncracked. A wall of framed photos titled "The Miller Promise" listed scholarships granted, community college, HVAC certification, nursing programs, state universities, names beneath each plaque like stakes in the ground. Reporters asked Margaret how it felt. She smiled the way a mother smiles when a child she worried over finally sleeps. "He told me once," she said, "that if he ever made it big, he wanted it to matter. This is what mattering looks like." Miller Construction moved on with quiet integrity. The new owners kept J. Dean's standards not because contracts forced them to, but because crews stayed when the work felt honorable. Hardhat still carried the motto he argued for at every budget meeting: building dreams, building lives. The company funded apprenticeships that gave 2 teens from the children's home their first shot at site engineering. Ben Carter mentored one. Alicia Reed walked another through her first safety audit until she could deliver it without notes. The Buckhead mansion sold, its proceeds converted into vans for after-school programs, tutoring stipends, and seed money for Bridge Year, a small initiative paying rent and groceries for youths transitioning to their first apartments. A corner of the new clinic bore a brass plaque, equipment funded by the Miller estate. In the garden behind the wing, a curved bench engraved with Jadine's name watched over jasmine and rosemary that perfumed evening air. And Monica? The city learned less about her with each passing month. Her circle thinned to silence. The club quietly reassigned her locker. Invitations stopped arriving. Some said she left Atlanta for a smaller place an hour away, where nobody recognized her at the grocery store. Others heard she stayed and moved into a short-term rental with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. What everyone agreed on, because they had seen it with their own eyes, was that the afternoon at Hayes Milton had ended the version of Monica who lived for polished glances and whispers of admiration. Sometimes consequence looks like a headline. Sometimes it looks like a door that doesn't open again. Every Tuesday, Margaret returned to the children's home with a canvas tote full of picture books and chapter novels. Kids called her Grandma Margaret and fought, politely, for the seat closest to her. She read about nurses and astronauts and carpenters who built things that didn't fall. After story time, she helped with math problems and held a hand that needed holding for no particular reason. On warm evenings, she sat on the garden bench and watched teenagers laugh in the golden hour between homework and lights out. She thought of the boy who had walked job sites with sunburnt shoulders and a notebook in his back pocket. She thought of the man who had learned that legacies aren't accidents. They're built like everything else worth standing under. Monica had wanted everything. Jadine left everything that mattered to those who needed it most. And in the rustle of book pages, the squeak of sneakers on hallway floors, the sparkle of new windows at twilight, the city kept saying his name without saying it. That's what love looks like when it learns to outlast betrayal. That's what justice sounds like when it chooses outcomes over applause. Do you think Jadine went too far with his revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.